thinking about how things are at the moment, I think one of the biggest changes that we've certainly got in my union, which is UCU, and I know you have in your union, a lot of the public sector unions and the private sector unions, but in a generation slightly before, is the devolution of a lot of collective bargaining and a lot of at least bargaining within framework to the workplace, to workplace reps. And we see that in individual schools, universities, GP surgeries, etc. And that trend has actually caused a whole set of challenges for workplace reps that place a whole set of responsibilities on workplace reps that really didn't exist, certainly in the public sector even 10 years ago. And as a result, I think I think the obvious answer to the question that we've been asked to think about, which is what is the role of workplace reps in delivering fairness at work, is that they are the key to that. I mean, they are the main mechanism for delivering it. But I think it's really crucial that that's not just a top-down process, that it's not just about the workplace rep delivering the union agenda in the workplace, but there's also a role for workplace reps in setting the agenda as is important and relevant for their own members. And that's really easy for us to know and remember as workplace reps. I think some of my colleagues who are perhaps officers and more senior trade unionists find that it's not that they forget that, but it's perhaps that they come in from a different perspective. And I think that that's really important, that workplace reps don't just focus on delivering the agenda as it comes down from the top, but also very involved in setting the agenda. And when I'm talking about agendas and interests, I mean those in a very broad sense. So one of the things I do is look at organising campaigns, and when you look at organising campaigns, you look at people who's coming to the union for the first time. One of the things that often strikes me about that is how broad their agendas are, and they're often far broader than the agendas as that we would imagine if we looked at the minutes of this conference. And they're often coming with issues which are much more about their communities, much more about public transport, about all sorts of issues, about accessing work and participating in work, just as much as what happens in the workplace. And so I think that's an important role for the rep, is kind of making sure that these kinds of formal agenda setting meetings like annual conferences, etc., reflects that much broader interest of many of our members. Because what I see in practice when you look at that process of agenda setting and how those different levels of the union link together, what nerdy academics would call articulate, is that some of those issues drop off the agenda as you get to the higher levels, and I think that's important. So we've got this potential tension between top-down and bottom-up, and sort of how information and ideas and representation works. And that tension has always existed. I'm quite relaxed about that tension. That's what unions do, is they manage those tensions. Obviously, when it comes to my own union and my own executive is rejecting a motion that I'm proposing, it bothers me a lot. But in general, I'm quite relaxed about that. What we know works is that when unions are coordinated in their policies and activism across both levels and across workplaces, and that's really essential. And that's a role that I think sometimes workplace reps get very focused on their workplace and make less effort to link across workplaces. There are clear mechanisms for sending motions up and down and that kind of thing, but across workplaces is often quite challenging. And to do that, of course, all this pressure is building on reps at a time when we have less and less facility time. So I know Carl will say something about that, so I'm not going to dwell on that too much. And it just gives less time to do some of the joined up thinking that ideally reps would need to be doing if they were able to do all of those roles, which is where the Fair Work Commission comes in. And I think, so what the Fair Work Commission is really interesting doing very interestingly is thinking about how to deliver fairer work, and I think that gives some space for that kind of joined up thinking and big picture thinking about the role that reps could have. And I think there's a couple of really important points that come out of these suggestions. The first is extending collective bargaining. That obviously implies a much bigger role for reps and future reps. Another is about sort of overhauling the system of legal rights and the enforcement of legal rights. And I think that if that were to happen, which is deeply necessary, we would need a different role for reps in that process. And in my own area of current research is interest about intergenerational fairness. And I've got a particular interest in young workers and young workers struggling to access appropriate jobs, also accommodation, but that's secure accommodation, that's something slightly separate, no matter what level of qualification they have. And I think those three areas would, if we were really sort of sitting down and brainstorming what fair work might look like, it would certainly bring together a big set of reforms in all three of those areas and more. And that would require input and a different kind of role for workplace reps. So reps are really important, I mean, in delivering in all of these areas. And to do that, they need support from their members that they're representing, obviously. But I think they also need support from the wider union, and I think that's where there needs to be space for joined-up thinking, for debate, discussion, thinking through different roles. And it's always why I'm very happy to participate in these kinds of fringe meeting kind of discussions, because they're usually the space where people can start to do that.